Hello, welcome to this video from IELTS Ace. In today's lesson we're going to be looking at some passive constructions that you can use when writing about processes. At the end of today's lesson you'll know 26 verbs that you can use in the passive voice in your writing. The passive voice is actually useful in a number of parts of the IELTS writing and speaking exams. Today we're just going to look at process diagrams which come up on writing task 1. It's also useful if you're asked to talk about maps and plans, or in the speaking if you have the topic of gifts and presents, or giving other people's opinions as well. So I'm sure that you've met the passive before in other English lessons, so we're not going to go through what it is too much. But as you can see, there are some example sentences here. Nowadays everything is made in China. So we have the present simple passive. I was given that watch by my grandfather. We have the past simple passive. The new IKEA will be opened next week. So we have the passive with will. And that milk in the fridge needs to be used up. So we have a passive with the infinitive. So very simply, to make the passive, we use the third form of the verb, the past participle, and before that we have a form of the verb to be, and that's the bit that changes depending on what tense we're actually using. So before we decide to use the passive, one of the things we have to look at in the diagram that we're given is this a natural or man-made process? In some cases it will even be a hybrid of both. So there's a diagram on this slide which is about how electricity is produced from wind energy. So just two sentences about this shows when we can use the passive and when we can't. So for example, the first step in the process, a suitable location is found for the wind turbine. So finding this location is something which is done by a person. We don't know who, which is why we're using the passive. In the next step, the wind turns the rotor blades. So in this case, something natural is causing the turning. So therefore, because it's a natural thing, we would generally use the active voice, not the passive. If you're given a process diagram to describe in IELTS, generally these processes are things that are done again and again, perhaps every day or certainly every year. So because this is a repeated thing, we use the present simple. However, it could be possible that they could show a process that happened or will happen only once. So if we do end up with this, then we do need to spot that we need to change the form of the passive. And again, as I say, to change the form, we simply change the part to be. So here are our first 4 passive constructions. These are all about the raw materials which are therefore likely to come at the beginning of a process. So our first one, firstly coffee seeds are planted. So if the process is about making some kind of food, then it's probably going to start with growing some kind of crop. So that means that something like seeds are going to have to be planted. Then once these seeds have grown into plants, the next step is probably going to be collecting something from that plant. So we call this harvesting. So therefore the coffee beans are harvested. Notice that it's the beans that are harvested and not the seeds. If we're talking about making something else, then we might need to get some kind of mineral such as copper or iron or something else which comes from the earth. In this case we would use mined. So copper is mined from the earth. Another one that I've seen recently is the process of recycling. So in this case, there's going to be some kind of recyclable material which is collected. So once the raw materials have been collected, then these are going to start to go through some kind of changes. So, for example, electricity is generated as the wind turns the rotor blades. Energy is transformed into electricity, so very similar to the first one. Notice the into that comes after transformed. So this is an example of a dependent preposition. So this is the preposition that we often need after this verb. The plastic is shaped using a mold. A mold, if you don't know, it's the shape of something, so that when you pour a liquid into it and then you let the liquid cool down, when you take it back out, it will be the same shape. Waste is sorted into different materials. Okay, again, we've got that into, sorted into. And the harvested fruit is separated from waste materials. So, as we said, this process of harvesting is where you collect the thing that you need. And of course, when you're doing that, you might accidentally also collect some leaves and other things that you don't actually need. So you need to separate the bits that you actually need. So then we have some industrial processes. So the harvested crops are cleaned to remove dirt and pesticides. Pesticides are chemicals which kill insects that would damage the plants. The meat is dried in a special oven. The liquid is heated to over 800 degrees Celsius. Again, we've got that to is heated to. The beans are roasted in batches. So not all at one time. The beans are roasted in smaller numbers. And the glass is melted. So where we heat the glass until it starts to change shape. The olives are pressed to extract oil. So if you press something, this is where you put something under a lot of pressure, and that forces whatever is inside to come out. Sand and clay are ground to a fine powder. So ground is the past participle of grind. So this is where you get something and you crush it to make it into a very fine powder. When I say fine, I don't mean good. I mean that the powder is made of very small parts. So just as an example, if you think of sugar and flour, flour is a fine powder. It's been ground. Coffee beans are milled to remove the outer layers. So milling is the process of breaking something into smaller parts, usually removing the parts that you don't need. So for coffee beans, they don't need this outer layer, or if you had nuts, then they need to break open the nut and take the bit which people actually eat and remove the outer shell. Preservatives are added to the mixture. So preservatives are something that you add to food, and this is generally the reason why you can go to the supermarket and buy something that you keep at home in your cupboard or in your fridge for several months without it going bad. And excess moisture is extracted from the leaves. So if it's extracted, it's taken away. Once the processes have been done to this particular thing, then it needs to be prepared for the user. So The final product is tasted to check the quality. So of course if it's food, this is something that they might do. The goods are packed into bags. Okay, whatever the thing that's being created here, it probably needs some kind of packaging. So depending on what it is, if it's how they make crisps, then those are going to go into bags. If it's coffee, it's probably going to go into jars. If it's some kind of drink, it's probably going to go into bottles. The packaged product is transported by lorry. So once they've packed these goods, they're going to transport them somewhere. Goods are delivered to shops and supermarkets. So in most cases, the goods are going to be delivered somewhere where people can go and buy them. The product is sold to customers. And finally, the final product is consumed by members of the public. So try this yourself. Pause the video now and try with the diagram that's on the page. Just write some sentences about each stage of this process. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, please do support this channel by subscribing. You can also visit our website at www.ielts-ace.com for more useful tips on passing the IELTS exam. And you can also join our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/IELTS Ace 1. Hope to see you next time. Bye.